It is one of the weirdest situations we have seen in sports, and it's a bit surprising it doesn't come up more often. What the hell is happening with the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard? So, Pablo Torre just with an absolute bomb on social media this week saying that there is some cap circumvention happening with the Los Angeles Clippers. And so basically, the Cole's notes of this is that Kawhi, with the second deal that he signed with the Clippers, it's not the one that got him from Toronto, to be fair, but for the deal that was signed, there's also maybe a bit of shenanigans going on because at around that time, Kawhi signed up for an endorsement deal with a tree planting company that also had a very noteworthy investor in Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. And that payment comes to the amount of $28 million over 4 seasons. And there's quite a bit of evidence that, I mean, there isn't that one absolute 100% like, okay, and that is where the collusion happened. But there are significant enough puzzle pieces that you can put together that you have to be just the most either optimistic or head in the sand or whatever person to believe that there wasn't something going on there. And now there are other reports from the Boston Sports Journal, I believe, that there's more payments that have kind of been unearthed for Kawhi, and it all kind of comes out to around $50 million in cap circumvention from the Los Angeles Clippers to Kawhi Leonard. And so obviously there's a lot of different things at play here. But the first part is, like I said before, there's obviously something happening here, right? Like, and Steve Ballmer, credit to him, I will say, because he hasn't, like, one thing, a quick aside, one thing that I feel is happening way too often now in sports and in politics for sure is like this whole thing of don't ask the question or don't answer the question you've been asked, answer the question you want to be asked. And there is an art form to doing that, and people have kind of lost it and just lost the plot entirely. But I feel like in sports, a lot of times when something like this comes up, it's no comment. We're going to let our legal team handle the matter or whatever. And I don't think it's I don't think it's an accident that the All-Star Game stuff happening in LA, all that got announced while this was happening either. Like, I think that was definitely on purpose. So there is a smokescreen type of a thing happening here. But to Ballmer's credit, they are coming out and just full on attack mode. Wasn't us. Didn't do it. Don't know what you're talking about. Whatever. And even if he is lying, he is doing so very convincingly. But I just feel like the evidence is stacking up to the point where it is obvious something has happened here. And it would be, like I said before, quite a level of naivete to think that the Clippers were not involved in this in any way, shape, or form. And so you are getting a couple of reactions to it. One of them is they're going to get the book thrown at them, as Ty said in the chat, and I agree. And we'll get to what that could look like in a second here. The other part of it is you're getting people saying, whatever, I'm sure every team does this thing. And here is where I have the issues with it. Kind of comparing it to the steroids in baseball back in the 90s, where it's like, oh man, everyone was doing steroids. So what's the big deal? And for a lot of guys, I come down on that. Yes. Like if you didn't test positive for steroids, I'm not going to hold any alleged use against you. If the league that you were competing in didn't catch you, then who am I to hold you out of a Hall of Fame or a pound for pound, whatever, if we're talking about UFC. They didn't get you, so you were able to pass. Congratulations. You were able to beat the game and make your way through. And like I said, same thing in fighting where, oh, well, all these guys are on PEDs. Just look at them. It's like, okay, maybe. But the one thing we can go on is who gets caught, right? Because if you start going by body type, it's like, look, Bartolo Colon was listed in the Mitchell report with steroids, right? You can look at George St. Pierre and be like, how? But then you see the training regimen and stuff like that. It's like, well, maybe. I feel like with this sort of a thing, does it happen all the time? Probably. Yes, I have no doubt in my mind that the Clippers are not the ones to invent this sort of a thing. But the other teams just have the common sense to not get caught. So is this something that a bunch of other teams across sports are doing? You're goddamn right they are. Probably. Anyway, right? Like I can't imagine they're not. But if you're dumb enough to get caught, then you deserve anything that happens to you. And any repercussions that come your way, you deserve it, right? So like looking at what the penalty should be, I think it has to be severe, right? And it's going to be an interesting test here for the NBA and for Adam Silver, because like his first big win was against the Clippers, but it was a layup, right? Just get the racist guy out of the league. Cool. Yeah, I can do that one. That seems like a gimme. This one, you have a team that has just built an arena, a team that has worked its way into being not a marquee franchise, but a noteworthy one that can draw attention at least. And it happens to be in Los Angeles, California. So this isn't just an easy like, oh well, just throw the book at him, and like this could have repercussions on the league as well if the Clippers aren't great. Not that they're the Lakers or anything like that, nor should that really matter, but it is something that leagues would consider. The one example that people are pointing to is with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I believe with Joe Smith, they signed him to he had 3 years before free agency. Or no, it was 3 years, and then you could sign him to a contract that would put you over the cap, but you can keep him bird rights and all of that. And so they signed him to 1 year, very small contract, and then overpaid him like you wouldn't believe in the last one. And the NBA caught it, and they took draft picks away. That is bare minimum here with the Los Angeles Clippers. It is being called the death penalty. It happened in college football with SMU when they were paying a bunch of dudes, which feels funny now, but they limited scholarships, recruiting classes, national television, all of those sorts of things. And so I would imagine like draft pick compensation is going to be taken away. And that could be devastating for the Clippers. Zach Lowe pointed this out on his podcast. Like LA, they traded away a bunch of draft picks, right? But they have done some work to keep the draft picks that they have in the next decade. So they kind of just riding out whatever this is going to be and then hoping that they can kind of rebuild it quickly after Kawhi is done and Harden is done and all of that. They have their pick in, I think, like 29, 30, 31, and 32. Like, I think they have all of those. But those are the next ones that they have. The rest of them are off with the Oklahoma City Thunder and everything like that. And so if you take away draft picks beyond that point, then we're talking about like a full like decade of not controlling your own picks and everything there. So I think that would probably be it. And fines are going to be levied 1,000%. They are going to be. But Steve Ballmer is one of the richest human beings on the planet. So fining him is whatever, right? Like they were able to do what they're alleged of doing because Steve Ballmer is a rich individual, right? Like he can afford that one. To just like funnel money through something else to get it to another guy. The other part of it too, that kind of came out after, is that like one of the termination clauses in a contract, like a lot of them will have, if you do something that brings embarrassment on the company or anything like that, right? Like if you go through any contract that you sign, there is something that is like, if you do something untoward that is damaging to the reputation of this company by being associated with you, then you're gone. One of the clauses for termination for Kawhi Leonard is if he was no longer on the Clippers, which is like, come on. So there's all of this. I don't think a fine would be enough. And so if you are actually circumventing the salary cap, the NBA isn't going to want that to feel like anything close to being okay. So they're going to need to make a statement here. And fines aren't going to do it. Draft picks might. But I think the real way you could absolutely damage this team is put different salary cap restrictions on them than any team for X amount of years, right? Like if you put the same like second apron limits on them, but just like move everything down a touch or something like that, like really limit what they can do, that's the deterrent and that sends the message, I think. So I like draft picks probably gone. People are saying terminate the contract. It's like, whatever. The contract is there. I don't know what doing that, like he would just try to find a way to sign back with the Clippers or something else, right? Like, but I don't think like that one kind of feels like what's done is done. But I do think that actually limiting what this team could do in free agency to try to buy their way out of any draft pick problems they may have, that is really where you are going to make this seem like something you can't do ever again. But I am so fascinated by this whole thing, and a huge shout out to Pablo Torre for some of the best journalism we've seen in sports in quite some time. So that is the wild story in the National Basketball Association right now. Again, for those of you who are listening in podcast form or catching this after, you can get these as early as possible by watching it live on the streams. The next guaranteed live stream is going to be Monday at noon on Twitch, Kick, and YouTube. That you can see all the places below where you can check us out there. But that's going to be the reaction to everything happening on Monday. And we got some combat sports we'll be getting ready for on that day as well.